Mali's military rulers are proposing changes to its constitution. They say it will pave the way for a return to civilian rule. But in such a divided country, will it serve any purpose? And what role will the military have? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Mohammed Jamjoom. It's a vote to approve or reject constitutional changes in Mali. Supporters say the amendments will ease a transition from military rule to a civilian-led government. But skepticism is growing. After years of coups, political instability and social unrest, mistrust in authority continues to be a fundamental problem. So is this referendum about actual change or just political theater? And are democratic elections even feasible in the future, given the country's political and social tensions? We'll explore this and more with our guests in a moment. But first, our correspondent Nicholas Hawk is in Mali's capital, Bamako, with more.
We're in downtown Bamako at the Nation Square, and this is where Malians have come out in the past to overthrow previous governments and to express themselves over the way their country is run. Now, they'll get a chance to express themselves through the ballot box in this historic vote. It's historic because there's been this desire to change the constitution since 1991, and it seems that Mali's military junta led by Assimi Goite is succeeding where previously democratically elected presidents have failed in organizing this referendum. Now, ahead of this referendum, there was much debate amongst intellectuals, academics, members of civil society in the opposition in what would be inside the text. Those that are for say it gives greater autonomy to the regions, more power to the president, and it changes, for instance, the role of the French language, no longer an official language, but a working language. It recognizes the diversity and the sovereignty of the Malian state. But those that are against say that the secular nature of the text is not in line with this country that is a Muslim majority country that has a long history of Islam. And then there are those that say that this vote is not credible simply by the fact that it's being carried by the Malian military junta, but also by the fact that many Malians outside of the capital here in Bamako will not be able to take part in the vote. Why? Because there's large parts of the north in the center of the country that are in the hands of armed groups linked to Al-Qaeda and ISIL. But no matter what, 8 million Malians are expected to vote and have a say over the way their country is governed. And this ahead of the scheduled presidential elections that are expected to take place next year. From Bamako in Mali, Nicholas Hawk for Inside Story.
Mali has struggled with political unrest for years. Back in 2012, the military overthrew the elected government in what was described as a major setback for democracy in Africa. A transitional government was eventually established, but it too was overthrown by the military in 2020, and yet another coup followed the next year. Now, faced with a political crossroads, the military says it's paving the way for democracy and civilian-led government, particularly with the presidential elections scheduled for 2024. All right, for more on all this, I'm joined by our guests. In Bamako is Fatima Al Ansar, consultant on peace and security in Mali and the Sahel region. She's also the founder of Tilwalte Peace Network. In London is Alex Vines, director of the Africa program for Chatham House. And in Yaoundé is Marie-Roger Biloa, president of Africa International Media Group and political commentator on Africa affairs. A warm welcome to you all, and thanks so much for joining us today on Inside Story. Fatima, let me start with you today. Supporters of the referendum say that it's supposed to pave the way for a transition to civilian rule. If it passes, will it really do that?
I mean, this is a very great question. Has the new referendum actually is, we can say that is a big step before actually the current government giving the election agenda, which will be coming out very soon. And the new constitution is mentioned that the president, the current president can actually resign, especially the military. President can resign from his military to actually present himself to become a president. So there is a chance that maybe the current president decide to present himself to the presidency, which is supported by the new constitution. So legally, it's something that can happen. Would you define that as a civilian regime? That's another debate. But I feel like in terms of democracy, there is a big step in that sense, because even the fact that the current regime is able to actually write this referendum and go to even mobilizing the population to vote is a big step, because the former regime in 2017 was unable to do it because of the political disagreement around some of the new things that was proposed in the new constitution. But there is 3 different points that people are like worried about, are concerned about in the new referendum, which is like the secular state, because the religious leaders are asking for multifunctional state, which I also think that it's not something new, because in the former constitution, it was still a secular state. So why is now that the religious leaders are going against that? So that's something that we should actually look at into deeply. And the second point is the armed groups, because the armed groups are concerned that the power is not decentralized enough. Less power is given to the local leaders. And so they don't really see themselves in the new referendum. And the third point is more power given to the president, so the political leaders don't see themselves. Some of them don't see themselves in the power given to the president, in the way that the president can dissolve the parliament anytime he wants. And also the higher judiciary council also is led by the president. So the judiciary people are against that. So those are
Fatima,
like some of the...
sorry to interrupt you. I'm sorry to interrupt you. Let's get into those details just in a short little while. Let me ask Alex right now. If this referendum passes, do you believe that the military will actually relinquish power?
Well, that is an open question. As your previous speaker just said, it's very unclear whether the interim leader Goite will actually run in the election, and so would potentially become a civilian leader. And so that's a question mark over this. But I would agree that this is an important step. There's been such negativity and pessimism about Mali, and internationally the whole way of looking at Mali at the moment is just to contain it. That this is a roadmap. It was agreed last year in July. The Economic Community of West African States, the West African regional body, said it would lift its sanctions if there was a roadmap. And this referendum is a stepping stone in that roadmap to elections next year. They were meant to have been in March, this referendum, but there's been a delay. So it is important to see this as a process, however imperfect it might be, with some risks. The particular one, I think, is that the concentration of power in the presidency, and also will Malians come out and vote, which we will get to see the turnout response of the referendum.
Marie-Roger, in such a divided country, if this referendum actually passes, will it actually serve any purpose?
It's storytelling about it from the current junta. They want people to believe that this is really a step forward because they are organizing something looking like election, and because former regimes, even elected democratically elected regimes, were not able to organize a referendum. But the question is a referendum per se something positive if the outcome is that, as it's been mentioned already, the president will have more power, and it leans more towards a dictatorship, because he can he will appoint the prime minister and the government and dismiss them whenever he wants without any counter power. And is it, can you consider it a move forward when the country is so divided about that? Because many believe that the military junta is not legitimate in organizing such a heavy thing, in changing constitution and things like that, while they are not elected. They have been there. They said, they took power to say, telling people that they are there to help settle the security issue. We see that they are far from it, and they now are causing a kind of a diversion because none of these issues on the table are touched. Are they going to leave power after this? You are not sure. Will they have more democracy after that? You are not sure. Will you have more unity, more peace in the country after that? You're not sure. So what is happening now, the most important thing which is happening now is that Assimi Goite wants to run after the transition. And he's tailoring a constitution which leads to that. And we are used to that. We have a current situation in Central African Republic where it's not a military junta, but a civilian government. But the President Touadéra will be finishing his 2 terms and he's not allowed to run again. So he's trying to change that with a new constitution. Same thing with a referendum.
Marie-Roger, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I want to ask with regards to the point you made about Assimi Goite. I actually want to ask Fatima about that. Fatima, do we know at this stage if Assimi Goite, who is the junta leader, who is the interim president, that whether or not he will actually run for president when the next round of elections happens? And what would the implications of that be if he did?
Honestly, that's a very good question that everybody is asking themselves. But the new referendum actually gave him authorization to run for the president. So the chances of him running is there. Legally, he has the right to run. But the thing is, we don't see any other political leaders who can run against him right now because the political leaders have lost the trust of the population. So the population right now, if you look at it, have more trust to Assimi Goite than to the political leaders. So there is not a strong opponent right now. So the chances of even him being asked by the population to run for presidency is higher because there is not a strong opponent right now in place. And I think the implication of that, I don't know, nationally, it's supported by the local population, but I don't know internationally how the international community will go about that. But the referendum actually give him authorization to run for the presidency if he decides to resign from his military duty, which we will know in the next 2 months that is coming.
Alex, looked to me like you wanted to jump in on that point that Fatima was making, so please go ahead.
Yeah, so the draft constitution, the referendum is tomorrow, it emphasizes that a president can only stand for 2 terms, so the clock starts back, and there is a regional norm of 2 terms and then out. But it also provides amnesty for abuses that happened before the new constitution, which will therefore exonerate the junta and others. I do look at it in a way of that this is transition politics. The situation in Mali is very grave. The state in out of Bamako doesn't have effective control over large parts of Mali, but we do need to think of ways of how to move forward. Bear in mind also that yesterday at the UN in New York, the foreign minister of Mali, Abdoulaye Diop, said that the UN peacekeeping operation, MINUSMA, should leave promptly. And so again, this raises issues of how to find a way forward in a very difficult situation. And I do think that this referendum might at least be an attempt of a direction of travel, however flawed, and the problems that the other speakers have highlighted.
Marie Roger, how much do you question the legality of amendments to the Constitution being carried out by a non-democratically elected government?
That's one of the major problems, and especially when you know what they have in the back of their minds. It's not really to give the country new institutions because that would be an emergency, that would be something people really urgently need. The problem is that they are doing all this just to find a way out of the commitment not to run as a transitional president. He's not allowed. He committed himself not to run towards ECOWAS, towards some partners, and now he's trying to overcome that hurdle. That's basically what it is all about, and we've been seeing that many times in many other situations, and we're just not surprised. And organizing a referendum is something easier than an election because it's a question yes or no. Or they will come up and say, well, 90% people agree. You have no way to check that, to verify that. We had that many times before. That's a classical situation. And we will have that again. We had that in Cote d'Ivoire. We had that in countless countries. So basically, that's just what is happening now. Because Mali is in a very, very difficult situation, as we know. And especially what they came for was to restore some kind of security, some kind of order, so that they can try to implant a new government, new civilian government, because we cannot go about a military government for forever, and that was their job, and doing so maybe make sure that the normal life for people is easier. You don't see that really, but what I can say is that the military junta has some kind of popularity because they have been working to undo the colonial legacy. And this is very popular, to oust the French, not only in Mali, that's been very popular, the French army, that's been very popular in other countries, like in Cameroon, where I am, where I know the colonel, Assimi Goite, had a lot of fans. And the fact that in the new constitution, he's saying that French is no longer an official language. This is colonial language. He's saying it's a working language. People like all that. But the point is, do we accept governments which are not elected, trafficking referendums and doing all that? And we're not even sure that at some point he will do elections if really.
Marie Roger, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I want to ask Fatima a question. You heard Alex, Fatima, a few minutes ago talk about the fact that Mali has called on the UN to withdraw its peacekeeping mission from the country without delay. How much does all this complicate the situation on the ground?
I mean, for weeks now, I would even say for a month, we have seen protests on the street of young people asking for the departure of MINUSMA. So that's not something new, because there have been always a critique on the mandate of MINUSMA in Mali that it does not reflect the reality in the country. So there is no peace to keep. So why would you be having a peacekeeping mission in the country? So I'm hoping that the speech that Abdoulaye Diop have given to the UN will be actually an opportunity for us to actually discuss on the mandate. With MINUSMA cannot leave completely, it's very important for them to actually see how they can adjust their mandate to the reality of the local situation. But my only worry, and the worry of a lot of other people, is the stabilization part of the mission, which is the development parts, because we have a lot of youth who work for the UN peacemaking mission in Gao, in Sambakzu, in Mopti, even in Bamako, that are going to go out of job. So do we really have a plan for those people? Because when you have youth out of jobs, they are vulnerable of being recruited by armed group, by the terrorists. So the worry is like, is the current government with all the economic crisis would be to take care of all those youth who are going to be out of job when MINUSMA leave. So that's the main concern, the development parts, the stabilization part of the mission, how will the current government be able to fit into the economy, which is already weak, but the population is supporting actually the departure of the MINUSMA mission because it had been criticized for a long time.
Alex, I saw you reacting to some of what Fatima was saying there. It looked like you wanted to jump in.
I think this is a really important point. I mean, MINUSMA's been operational since 2013, and it's a major employee and source of investment into Mali. And so its withdrawal, as you've just heard, is going to be very disruptive. So it is important that the UN continues to have a mandate for peace support and development. The MINUSMA mandate as a peacekeeping operation has failed now. It does need to go, but there needs to be something that continues. And actually, MINUSMA and Algeria were really influential, important in pushing for this roadmap with a referendum. So their good offices have had a role. The UN Special Representative based in Bamako, Al-Ghasim made that point yesterday in the UN Security Council, for example.
Alex, I also want to ask you about this potential timeline for elections. The expectation is that when elections happen, it would probably be in 2024. Do you think that's realistic?
Such a good question. And look, the security situation in large parts of Mali is very, volatile, alarming. There are some areas very difficult to pull off an election. There are local political compromises. For example, right in the north of the country around Kidal, with Tuareg groups at the moment, and you've also got radical Islamic groups that have kind of profiting out of some of the security vacuums. So I could see the calendar of elections being delayed because of insecurity. And the Russian investments into security, the Wagner Group, haven't provided security guarantees, which the junta has said that they are doing. So this is problematic. But it is really important that there is some sort of an election as part of this process. But how that's going to be inclusive in difficult security situations is I have no clear answer to that.
Marie-Roger, what do you think when it comes to the prospect of elections? Do you think that this timeline can be adhered to, and do you think that the prospect of elections is even feasible when it comes to all the tensions, the political, societal, all the security challenges in Mali?
But I would say the background thing is that first time the military junta had to give a timeline when they will retreat and leave power. They said 5 years. They wanted 5 years transition, which is the regular term for an elected regime, elected president. So it shows that they don't want to leave, that they've been, discussing with ECOWAS and going back and forth 12 months, 18 months, now 24. It's not something they want to do. They don't want to leave. So I just wanted to say something about MINUSMA and the problem that the current regime, the junta, the military junta, what they've been doing is to reduce the political space of Mali. When you decide to oust the French, many people can understand that, especially Africans. But you decide to disrupt your relations with your neighbors, with ECOWAS, with this and that, and going to the UN and insulting the president of Niger, saying basically that he's not from Niger because he's light-skinned, those kind of things. And now, expelling all, you had a lot of foreign, I would say, partners in Mali who've been leaving. Now MINUSMA, they want them to leave. I mean, I don't think it's a very good thing for Mali to be in this sort of isolation while other people try to extend their partnership. They only cling to Wagner and Russia, and you don't, you just ask, what is the plan? What is the larger picture for that? Where are you going to? Expelling, chasing people, limiting everything. So what is the way ahead? So it's a real problem now also, and I think they are really going over their job. They are a transition. These kind of moves should be left to an elected government.
Fatima, we don't have a whole lot of time left, but I want to ask you about one particular aspect when it comes to all this. Many Malians won't be able to take part in the vote because there's large parts of the country that are in the hands of armed groups linked to al-Qaeda and ISIL. How does that impact all this?
Yeah, that's why from the beginning, I always feel like going towards the election right away is not the solution. If we look at it, Mali, since the independence today, we have 5 coups d'etats. And each coup d'etat, we have been having the same way of solving the problems. ECOWAS, international community, put sanction on the country, force them to go and organize the election without really solving the real cause of the problem, which is the insecurity, and which is the fact that the Malian government does not have the control of our territory at all. So we actually push them again to go to the election without really solving that security issues. We're going to have another coup d'etat, I would say, in another 3 years, in another 4 years, or even 5 years again. So I think that before even going to organize the election, it's very, very important to come out with a concrete security plan on how to take control over the territory of the country. Otherwise, we'll go to the election. And I can guarantee you that the election will happen. The election will happen. Maybe it will be delayed in a month or 2 months, but the election will happen. And we might have an elected president. It could be a former president or it could be a civilian, but it's not a guarantee for a long-lasting democracy because we haven't really solved the real cause of the problem, which is the security situation and the fact that we don't have the control of our territory, and there is still a lack of good governance in the way of governing the country.
All right, well, we have run out of time, so we're going to have to leave our conversation there. Thanks so much to all of our guests, Fatima Al Ansar, Alex Vines, and Marie-Roger Biloa. And thank you, too, for watching. You can see the program again anytime by visiting our website, aljazeera.com. And for further discussion, go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. From me, Mohammed Jamjoom, and the whole team here, bye for now.